I've wanted to participate in Inktober for years. I finally did it and will share my experience with you in this video. Inktober is a drawing challenge that Jake Parker created in 2009 to improve his inking skill. Since then, it has become a global initiative with thousands of artists taking part every year. Participants draw one picture a day for each day of October. There are no strict rules. You can follow the list of prompts published on the official website or choose your own. You can draw traditionally or digitally as long as you use ink or inking techniques of any kind. If you'd like to learn more, I'll leave a link to the website in the description. Also, if you like science fiction, you can find all my books on Amazon in ebook and paperback. You'll find links to them in the description as well. For each drawing I used 1 or 2 references, and I gave myself a time limit between 1 and 2 hours, depending on the complexity and how much time I had available that day. This was more than I had done for Smogost, but I had never inked anything before in my life, so this is a whole new world for me. I'll reveal my top 5 in the end, so leave yours in the comments. Without further ado, let's get started. Day 1. Moustache. When we talk about moustache, we're talking about dwarves. I decided to start by drawing a bearded dwarf and emphasizing his big moustache. I placed him at a table in an inn. I like the way the beer foam in the mug turned out, better than the moustache, which should have been the main focus of the drawing. However, I like how I conveyed the feelings of the ring holding the moustache hairs together. For a first attempt, not bad. Day 2. Wave. Moving from moustache to braids, I decided to move from dwarf to an elf, and from tavern to some place unspecified, but she's about to draw her sword, so someone is about to get sliced. I really like how the face and hair turned out, but a little less so the breasts, which lacked volume on the left side. I noticed the problem when it was too late to correct it, but I have to say that I generally like the pose. Maybe it's because it's very static and therefore it was difficult to mess it up. Day 3. Crown. I really liked how the hair turned out in the previous drawing, so I decided to continue drawing elves, this time with loose hair. I particularly like the legs and the skirt that rises as the queen walks, and overall proportions of the body, but the arms would need a complete overhaul. I could have darkened the area under the hair more to create more contrast. Day 4. Murky. I immediately thought of a marsh creature. Then I found a beautiful reference image of an anthropomorphic warrior frog. It's been my favorite drawing for a while. I'm particularly pleased with how the fabric turned out, especially in the top of the skirt. I also like the pose with her legs spread and her feet pointing in different directions, which gives a sense of stability. The shield and armor fits nice against the frog's body. In short, it's beautiful. Day 5. Deer. This time I attempted a very ambitious double subject. While I like how it was turning out, I didn't have the time to perfect the details. I really like the wind-swept hair. It's just a shame that I figured out how to add movement after drawing those straight lines. I also like the leg holding out on the rocks, the magic staff and the deer's neck. Unfortunately, since the drawing was so large, the face ended up being very small and I struggled to make it look decent. Day 6. Pierce. This drawing is inspired by Robin Hood, who hit a perfect bullseye by splitting an arrow that had also hit a perfect bullseye in two, thus winning the tournament. I like how I made the bowstring vibrate after the shot, but it's a shame the art drawing the bow looks a bit deformed. Day 7. Starfish. I couldn't help but think of Starro here, the giant starfish that serves as the final boss in James Gunn's Suicide Squad. In fact, I found a photo of James Gunn to which someone had added one of the mini Starros. These are the little stars that stick to human faces to take control of them. Well, I had to draw it. I'm happy with how the tentacles surrounding his face turned out, but I struggle with the scarf. Day 8. Reckless. I tried to think of the most reckless thing a living creature could do, and I pictured a little pixie bothering a huge sleeping monster just for the fun of booping its face, risking waking it up and being devoured. Day 9. Heavy. Of course, I immediately thought of heavy metal, and I decided to draw a skeleton guitarist playing a shiny guitar with a neck, well, not exactly straight, and now that I think about it, it doesn't even have a strap to hold it up, and it doesn't even have a jack output, and it's not even connected to any amplifier. How does it play? Black magic, that's how it does, black magic. Day 10. Sweep. I immediately thought of the term used in car games and wanted to recreate a typical western scenes with poker players around a saloon table, an ace-filled character and an impending brawl. Considering I have 4 characters in a single drawing, I'd say it turned out pretty well. I didn't have much time to draw everyone in detail, and I don't have the skill to do so anyway, but I really like the armchair. Of all things, the armchair's padding is my favorite detail in this drawing. Day 11. Sting. Ever since I saw the prompt link, I knew what I was going to draw. Sting Golden Sting. They tell me that Sting isn't very recognizable, and well, it's true, I don't think I'd recognize him without seeing the drawing next to the photo I used as a reference, but Sting is very recognizable. Day 12. Shredded. How can I not think of Nanto Seiken? I draw Ray, master of the South Deeper Waterfall Feast, slicing up a random guy he came across in the desert. Day 13. Drink. I must have watched documentaries about Serengeti and the eternal dilemma of should I drink or will crocodiles eat me, hundreds of times, because I immediately thought of a scene like that. I was afraid the giraffe would turn out deformed, but it didn't as I continued with the drawing. Day 14. Trunk. I found a photo of a squirrel munching on nuts on a cut tree trunk and decided to recreate it. I'm really happy with the end result, especially the squirrel and its tail that I thought would be difficult, but it came out beautifully in just a few minutes. Day 15, Ragged. It took me a while to decide what to draw. In the end, I chose that scruffy mute pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean who communicates through his parrot. I put him at the helm and that's it. It's not my best drawing, but I like the beard and face. They express the apathy of someone who has nothing left to lose and live by inertia. Day 16, Blunder. It's a term I learned from watching chess content, so in my imagination it's firmly tied to chess. So why not add a surprised Pikachu face while suffering the scholar's checkmate? I laughed way more than I should have. Although in hindsight I think I would have done better to draw the white queen in checkmate position to make the drawing more understandable. But Pikachu blunders while moving his knight, so... Day 17, Ornate. I wanted to draw a very elaborate and baroque object, and I thought, why not draw a book? And maybe it doesn't seem like it from the drawing itself, but somehow it took me a hell a lot of time. In the end I decided it had to be the Necronomicon, even though lore dictates that the Necronomicon should be bound in human skin, and this one has everything but it. I really like how I rendered the pages and the crossbone at the corners. Day 18, Deal. Here I spent some time thinking about the concept of the word deal that I wanted to represent, and when I thought of drawing a snake finding oven mittens on sale, I knew I'd found the right idea. Look at how annoyed he is. Day 19, Arctic. This is a reference to the Futurama episode about penguins reproducing at an astonishing rate. The humans begin hunting the penguins, but there are so many of them that the humans are forced to flee the frozen planets, leaving their weapons behind. The episode ends with two penguins pointing rifles at each other. If you've never seen Futurama, you must watch it immediately after finishing this video. Day 20, Rivals. Oh, I was really worried that I wasn't doing Inigo Montoya justice. He's such an iconic character that I would have hated to draw him and have him be unrecognizable like Sting. Instead, I have to say it turned out pretty well. I really like the pose, although I still need to figure out how to render the folds of the sleeves properly. As for the face, I think I made it more beautiful than the original. And I also like the hair. I decided to write his iconic line, even though it shows that calligraphy and I live in different worlds. Day 21, Blast! Eagerly awaiting my first drawing assignment for Arcane, I decided to try my hand at Jinx with the Blast theme. I took reference for her and for Explosion, and I drew her in the classic pose of a character detonating something while facing away from the explosion. However, by the time I got to the clothing and equipment, a lot of time had already passed. This is one of the drawings that took me the longest during Inktober. I decided to simplify them, and it reminded me of Lara Croft, so I decided to take the plunge and create a crossover between Jinx from Arcane and Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. Day 22, Button. Don't ask me how I came up with the idea of drawing a lizard wearing a button as a head. I mean, there doesn't necessarily mean to be logic behind whatever I do. Day 23, Firefly. You can't use the term Firefly without being depressed about Firefly's cancellation. I mean, it was one of the best sci-fi series of the 2000s, and they cancelled it halfway through the first season. They didn't even let them make a full season. If you've never seen it, catch it up. It's definitely worth it, even though it was cancelled so early. Day 24, Rowdy. What does a drunk and disorderly person look like? A monkey! So why not draw King Louis holding a pint instead of a banana? Considering I only used a few strokes, I'm really pleased with how I rendered the fur. Day 25, Inferno. This one requires a few leaps in logic. Obviously, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy came to mind first when talking about Inferno, but I thought that was a bit banal. I wanted to do something sillier, so I set it in the Dragon Ball Afterlife, on the long snake that leads to King Kai's planet, rather than technically in Hell. The unfortunate souls are a soldier and his cat, obsessed with throwing things off the table. Day 26, Puzzling. I had little time today, so I opted for a quick subject, the classic Rubik's Cube. I'm pleased with how I differentiated the various colors of the faces, despite only having black and white to work with. Day 27, Onion. It's another day with little time. A weeping onion probably isn't the most original idea, but I really didn't have time to think anything better. I love how it captured the poor vegetable's devastated expression. Day 28, Skeletal. After day 8 of Smogus, I couldn't wait to put my hand at another skeleton to see if I had improved. Comparing the two, I have to say I did. The dinosaur is much more balanced and realistic than the dragon. Unfortunately, after finishing, I noticed that I must have used an AI image as a reference. I tried to pay attention, but not all AI images are correctly catalogued on Pinterest. One leg is connected to the pelvis, the other to the chest. Come on, it's sticking out of his ribs. I love this drawing, now I can't stop looking at it. Oh well, I mean, the curators of these museums just can't put a skeleton together properly. It's definitely not my fault. Day 29, Lesson. It took me a long time to come up with the idea for lesson, and I won't deny I interpreted it ironically and considering drawing the scene with Anakin at the temple. However, I thought the Padawan massacre might be a little too difficult to draw, so I opted for Yoda teaching while suspended in his carrier for lazy people who don't feel like walking. This is the drawing that took me the longest, and I would have liked to deviate further from the reference image, but it was already quite a challenge as it was. Ultimately, I'm very happy with the result. Day 30, Vacant. No doubt about it, I immediately started drawing a vacant throne, so basically an empty throne. I mixed the reference images for an elven throne, all wooden leaves, and a crown that I placed on the throne seat to emphasize the feeling of the absence of a ruling figure. Making all these leaves with veins took me a lot of time, but I really love the final result. Day 31, Award. It took me a long time to figure out what to draw. Maybe I spent more time thinking than drawing. But once I figured it out, well, it's just beautiful. The face is clearly not Aragorn's. It didn't come out nearly as well as Inigo Montoya or Jinx, but an Oscar for Best Speech hiding an Oscar for Best Friendzone, you have to admit it's brilliant, I tell myself. Before making the top 5, here are some honorable mentions: Murky, Blunder, Deal, Skeletal and Vacant. At 5th place in the top 5 we find Award. I'm placing it here only because the idea makes me laugh so much, as the drawing itself isn't spectacular, although I like how I rendered the chainmail. At fourth place we find Rivals, because I think this is the first time I've ever drawn a person whose face and pose I like. And it only gets this distinction because it was drawn one day earlier than Jinxcroft. At third place we find Trunk, because the final rendering of the tree trunk with the moss and both the pose and the squirrel fur came out much better than I hoped. In second place we find Lesson, because it's the most complex composition I've done so far, and I really like how I used the thick marker to create the shadows on the two children in the foreground and on Yoda's face. In first place we find Blast, because I simply love everything about it. I love that it's a mashup of Jinx and Lara Croft, and I like how I rendered the explosion behind her and the light illuminating her from behind. It's the drawing that I've most imaginatively drawn, distancing myself from references. I'm very happy to put the first subject I drew from Arcane, a series that I really loved a lot, in first place here. Overall, I'm really happy with my first Inktober. The average drawings are much prettier than I expected. I look forward to reading your top 5s in the comments, and as always, happy writing, happy reading, and happy drawing. Bye!